Doctor Strange is one of my favorite Marvel films, one of the only ones that I can bear watching more than once, but now that I look back on it almost 5 years after its initial release, there's so much more that I think that this film could have been. If you only saw the opening 2 scenes from this movie and weren't made aware that they were from the same film, chances are that you would think that they were completely separate entities. One perspective shows off the nigh-comical beheading of some poor sap carried out by wizards with far too much makeup, and the other is a neat sequence of the main character preparing to perform surgery and then proceeding to show off his intelligence by perfectly reciting trivia during the operation. One bears heavy fantasy themes, the other those of a realistic fictional drama. Now let's investigate the latter scene first. Benny Man Captain Crunch is our titular character, Dr. Stephen Strange, a renowned neurosurgeon and all-around smartass. We learn of his expertise through his actions as he dons medical equipment and subsequently operates on a patient. His demeanor is revealed through the dialogue that he has with other characters that, while little more than minor save for Christine, still have their own personalities. In fact, what I like so much about them is that they play a role in Strange's future development as a character. Strange is arrogant, prideful, and strives to make sure that he's the center of attention no matter what. While everyone else in the operating room is concerned with saving the life of the person on the operating table, Strange holds himself with a certain glee as he recites album release dates for esoteric jazz artists. When it comes to making a crucial incision, Strange pushes his colleague out of the way, claiming that they don't actually know a damn thing. But that's not the truth at all, is it? We all know that the real reason Strange demands he makes the incision is because he wants his name in lights. This is a powerful opening scene because not only have we now learned who our main character is, but we've also set up expectations for his development. He's an insufferable douchebag, and we the audience inherently know that this will be the primary focus of his future development. In just one scene, we've learned all of that from one character, our main character, and it feels so odd considering the scene that actually precedes it. I'll start off this segment by saying that if this scene was removed from the movie entirely, then the film would have been noticeably better. It's not so much that a guy is decapitated as it is who's present in the scene and what it tells us about the quote-unquote villain of this film. Caecilius, our main Anakin-esque villain, got a little too into the works of the band Kiss and wants to bring about a dark overlord with which he plans to rule the world with the help of other heavily face-painted individuals. They walk in, all covered in robes, dramatic reveal, dude dies, and the scene ends. Now, here's the problem. We learned next to nothing from this scene. Caecilius is probably the most generic villain ambition known to man, leaving little to explore in terms of what sent him down that path, and his cronies aren't much better off, either, since none of them seem to do a whole lot aside from blindly follow his word. Going even further, what difference does it make if Caecilius carries out this execution versus one of his followers? None. It makes no difference. And even worse, the events here are explained in 2 lines of dialogue later in the film. The film is also written to tell the events of Doctor Strange's rise and emergence as a superhero, meaning that he's in virtually every scene. What he knows and experiences is what we, the audience, get to know and experience. It's for that reason that we shouldn't know what Caecilius looks like, much less what actions he carries out, because it's not something that Doctor Strange would actually know anything about. If they had removed the execution scene entirely, this film would have had a fantastic start to it. The stark contrast of these 2 scenes is further highlighted by how painfully similar these 2 characters are. Alright, I know, it's a weird take, but hear me out. Nobody likes Caecilius, which is why the people that follow him are also just a bunch of brain-dead, power-hungry cronies. Nobody likes Strange, yet the people who work with him are there because that's what they've trained for their whole adult lives. The dynamic between a villain and a hero is made infinitely more interesting when the villain has either character traits or at least some kind of leverage that the hero is striving to have. A well-written villain should challenge the hero on more than a physical level. Caecilius offers none of these. He's also just as despicable and has powers that Strange gains fairly easy access to early in his training as a wizard himself. So why do we care about Caecilius? Simply put, we don't, because he's just another bad guy that will be inevitably swept away by the hero when all is said and done. Compare these two to the dynamic of the Avengers and Thanos. The Avengers are a group of heroes desperately trying to be heroes, yet time and time again they're made out to be the villains. And on the opposite side, Thanos is a singular entity and a villain that sees himself as a hero. Strange's development by the end of the film is at least believable because in the end he understands the importance of working with others and not being so stuck up all the time, but he still carries his arrogance. Caecilius has no input in this. What does Caecilius even contribute to making Strange realize how crucial having a team at your back and not being the one in the spotlight all the time is? Basically nothing. And that's why he's so forgettable. That's why he shouldn't be given a central role in the opening scene of the movie, because not only do we remove the mystery of who our villain is, but we also just don't care. Beyond the main villain, there's also a massive genre-based problem in the world of Doctor Strange. Without the superhero blanket that all of these Marvel movies hide under, what genre of film would you classify Doctor Strange as? We could call it a comedic fantasy film, given that it deals with wizards and the mystical arts and has forced one-liners throughout, but you could just as easily call it a fictional drama. Not to say that dramas have to be all serious or that comedic films can't be dramatic. I'm saying that the movie flips its entire approach, its entire premise, completely upside down several times. First scene, boom, weird, dark fantasy film. Second scene, fictional drama that carries the first act of the film. Second act of the film starts, and now we're back into the dark fantasy film, but characters say funny lines now, and Strange goes back to the realm of the fictional drama to check up on his character development. Then the third act of the film starts, and we're in the fantasy film full swing now, but then the epilogue takes Jonathan Pangborn from the fictional drama segment and uses him to further the world of the fantasy aspects? If it's not dizzying, then at the very least it leaves a very confusing impression. What I will say I enjoyed about the merging of the two genres was the sheer visual marvel that presented itself whenever the mages were most directly interacting with the real world. Strange in his spirit form, the mind-bending fight in the city, Strange being sent on a mage-powered acid trip when he arrives in the dojo the first time, and so forth. And as much as I've complained about how this clashing of two genres has ruined the movie viewing experience, I also recognize that this film is nothing without the two settings being at odds with each other. Thematically, it makes total sense if you think about it. For most of the film, Strange is conflicted between following this mystical path that he doesn't fully believe in first, and initially starts off on a path to get in, complete a healing procedure for his hands, and then go back to living his life as a world-renowned neurosurgeon. When he starts getting pulled deeper into leading a life as a wizard, he resists it, and keeps himself more or less tied to his position at the hospital since that was his initial goal. The movie itself, on the other hand, understands that Strange's final goal, his actual goal, is to become a person who sees the value in working with others. How Strange has to go about learning that secondary goal is through the path that he's chosen for himself already, through training in the mystical arts and making uneasy partnerships with the people around him. There's an exact moment in the film where the switch between this goal happens, during the fight with Caecilius and featuring the Cape of Levitation. It's actually the only scene in which Caecilius proves himself as useful, since he's basically the plot device that kickstarts Doctor Strange's rise to power and eventual conclusion as a character. Let me go off on another tangent and say that Caecilius offers nothing as a character. He's an annoying roadblock, and while I love Mads Mikkelsen, I can't help but feel like Caecilius single-handedly drags the entire film down. From the weird introduction that's at a disconnect from the rest of the film, to the interactions that he has with the other wizards throughout the movie that are honestly just filler, his character is a throwaway plot device. Yet he takes up a good portion of the film because Marvel felt like they needed to add him to create conflict and slow the film down. Okay, back to the fight scene between Caecilius and Doctor Strange. What I love most about this scene is how it physically shows the conflict of interest between Strange's goal of returning to his beloved job as a neurosurgeon as soon as possible, and the movie's goal of turning him into a better person. When confronted by Caecilius, Strange wants to kill him with the axe, the most direct route, but the cape pulls him the other way towards a capturing device, the more empathetic route. It's not subtle, but it's not so much the level of subtlety that I'm concerned with as much as it is a clear intention being fully delivered on in a way that makes sense, at least given the parameters of the movie. The only issue with this entire scene is, well, aside from the dialogue with Caecilius, because who really cares, how it ends. We spend this entire sequence introducing a new character in the Cape of Levitation, exploring Strange's incapabilities, and when he's facing death, his dependence on help from others. When he finally puts on the cape, the music swells, away of the film telling us that this is finally the hero that we've been looking for, and he's ready to get out there and start kicking ass when... Ugh, Marvel, I get it. You add comedy to your films because you want to keep them lighthearted and all of this, but this weird joke at the end of the scene completely undercuts everything that preceded it. Instead of ending this section with a statement that the main hero of the film has finally come to terms with being a hero, you end it with a punchline. Let me be clear in saying that comedic moments in movies aren't all bad. It's that they, like serious moments, have a time and place, and oftentimes Marvel doesn't know how to balance that out properly most of the time. It's almost like whenever a scene gets too serious, some executive comes in and says, "Hey, throw a funny line in there. This is too grim for audiences to appreciate it." Age of Ultron was by far the most guilty of this, and it's what I hate the most about Doctor Strange. Strange is brought into the monastery, given tea, and a glimpse into the magic that awaits him, only to be shortly kicked out by the Ancient One because that's funny. When he enters the monastery fully, Mordo gives him a slip of paper and says, "Oh, it's the Wi-Fi password. We're not savages," because trying to let Strange take in his surroundings isn't engaging enough and we need more funny. And I've already used this as an example, but the cape tapping at Strange's face at the end of this scene really feels like it's in there to be the funny break that Marvel is so heavily addicted to. That's not to say that this film is without its fair share of good comedic moments. I especially like the scene where Christine is scared shitless by Strange's ethereal appearance later in the film. It's a comedic moment that makes sense, goes along well with the scene, and it's a moment that helps develop the relationship between these two characters. Or how about the scenes with Wong, whose no-nonsense attitude contrasts perfectly with Strange's wit and makes most of the scenes with the two enjoyable. And for all of the weird one-liners in the film, my favorite one has to be the one where after being sent on the mage-supported drug trip, Strange asks, "What's in that tea?" "It's just tea, with a little bit of honey." It's perfect comedy, and it's unfortunate that these good moments are sandwiched in between moments with a villain that we don't care about, and other moments that contain less bearable attempts at comedy. The most satisfying thing about this film has to be its ending. Not because, oh thank goodness it's finally over, but because by the time we reach the final moments of the film, we feel like we've seen a character mature and change in some reasonable ways. What I liked most was how Strange went from being a complete narcissist that everyone clearly disliked and only respected for his surgical abilities to slightly less of a narcissist. It's clear in the epilogue segment with Thor that he still thinks very highly of himself, but the fact that he's asking for help from someone else and listens to what they have to say is logical improvement. A character that exudes what I can most succinctly describe as villainous character traits at the beginning of a film will not be completely clear of those traits by the time a film ends. Doctor Strange is a good film that's overshadowed by its need to have a villain for Strange to be tested by to artificially stretch out the film's length. Otherwise, this film is great. It has some good comedic moments, believable character development, and some truly amazing and creative CG work. It's good. I just think it deserved better.